You're going to want that. Yeah.
See Sarah.
Yeah, exactly. Ugh. I almost left John's car here last night. All right. Yes.
I'm sorry. I've already run. Somebody came to me and asked about a course just at the beginning of the break. I've got it opened up again. The course that JD's teaching.
Oh, in Columbia. You know, we should, yeah, I'm remiss. We should be talking about all that's going on. I mean, we got
Next Saturday, Columbia Sailing Center.
Okay, next Saturday, Columbia Sailing Center. Sailing Club. There's a, yeah, thank you.
And I'll try to do better this time.
He's getting pretty good, I gotta admit. I was impressed last fall. That was good. We did the advanced race, man.
Tell some of these people up front that it mattered.
I don't know. It was good. It was good. Got me all energized, you know? Very
I thought
impressive.
in your new position it would help.
It's a club race officer course, right? The one day?
Yeah, next weekend's the one day.
Next weekend. And what else do we have in the, I mean, what else do we have on the tap for race management, even around the country? Or this, you know, take.
Go to the calendar, it's on the US Sailing website, seminars calendar, the race officer. You can see everything that's listed. If you don't find something in your area, contact me. And if anybody wants one, I have plenty of business cards here. We can talk about getting something set up in your area, and I can put you in contact with the people in the education department, and we'll set up a course at your club or, you know, the local sailing center. We've got a bunch. What we typically have the most of is one-day race management courses. That's the one's that's requirement for certification as a club race officer. There's a smaller number of advanced two-day courses, which is required for higher level certifications. And the same model exists for judges, one-day and two-day courses, advanced, basic and advanced for judge certification. And there's also a smaller but growing number of umpire courses.
That's great.
On the U.S. Sailing website, go to the line up at the top that says competition and drop down the big menu there, and you'll find how to become a whatever it is you would like to become.
And then there's
I think there's a fill in the box part, how to become a successful business person.
I missed that class somewhere.
How to become a better spouse.
Yeah, that's what I ought to be taking instead of these advanced race management. Okay, yeah.
So next November, tentative state the date, but it's not definitely yet. So it looks like the weekend of the 16th. We will have this type of forum level for judges, race officers, umpires. There'll be a variety of round tables, some awards presentations, and it's looking like it's going to be 16th and 17th.
So 16th and 17th of November.
And leadership, stakeholders forum. So it'll be the first year of a new thing that we'll do. Somewhat like the U.S. Sailing Symposium, which is more for like race instructor or club, your program instructors. This will be for race officials.
It's great. Chicago.
Yeah.
Maybe you'll make that, John?
Oh, good. Okay. And then to follow on that again, next year, which is obviously 2020, Sailing Leadership Forum will be in San Diego, and we will hold essentially this meeting again there. And every year we have Sailing Leadership Forum, we'll do it wherever it is. And then in the off year, which is the odd numbered years, we will be having this kind of forum. We'll try to move it around the country every other year. Yeah.
And there's a similar forum to this in Annapolis next month, I think, in February.
Similar, but not the same.
Yeah, it's more race management.
Yeah.
Only,
and
right?
it's part of their reopening of their new clubhouse.
Gotcha.
The opening of their new clubhouse.
Yes.
While you're talking race management, part of race management is also measuring. So
So if I can put in a plug for there's going to be a World Sailing Measurement Seminar in North America, probably in May, June, or July.
Right.
So talk to Matt or talk to me about it. It's going to happen.
Right.
So if you've got people that are interested in measuring, we're looking for people that want to be international. Like I do.
Right. And where I've heard a little bit about that, but I haven't got any details yet. Where do we think that's going to be?
Sort of four people we think are coming. It's probably going to be somewhere in the U.S., but it might end up in Canada, depending on.
Okay. Great. So for folks who are interested in measurement.
Great. Lot going on. I know we've got this annual meeting is next weekend? No, 2 weeks away, right?
Hilton Head.
In Hilton Head as well.
And
So-
the room block is sold out.
Uh-oh.
And then if I could add one more thing, National Sailing Program Symposium, which is the educational coaching training side of U.S. sailing every other year, is in 2 weeks. It's the end of this month in Jacksonville. You can sign up on the website, but that's typically attended by folks, sailing program directors, lead instructors. It's really focused on the educational community.
Great. Then we got some little regatta in Miami too, right?
Oh, that little thing.
Is that just?
Stand-up call.
It does overlap a little bit, I know. I think I'm going to try to go first half of Miami and second half of the week in Jacksonville. Well, great. All right, so let's get back on to our next topic, and we talk about on-water safety. And Steve Shapiro's here. He's our safety officer extraordinaire for Race Week. We're really lucky to have him here that gets everything organized. And, you know, unfortunately, we had to really put him to use a couple of years ago, and thank God that it was successful. That's all I got to say. So, Steve, I'm going to let you, you know, I think there's some best practices, you know, what we've learned a little bit from what our event does, and hope to share it.
Well, I guess my first question is to you all. How many of you have been at a regatta that somebody's got seriously injured?
Or dead.
Well, and then my second question is how many people have been where there's actually been a death? So, you know, and so, you know, there are literally hundreds of regattas in the United States, and we spend a lot of time on our SIs and our notices of race, but how much time do we spend on preparation for some safety issues? And, you know, I kind of try to break it down into three things. One is you must have a plan. You must prepare people for that plan, and then you must execute. And so if you can do those three things and really work with the organizing committee, you can have a great regatta. And I give credit to Randy. You know, we talked about this, I don't know, 10 years ago. And we said, you know, if we're going to really run the best regatta in the United States, hint, 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 we have to think about these safety issues. And I can't think of a race week that we haven't had a serious injury. Some didn't result in anybody going to the hospital. 2 years ago, we actually shocked somebody on a sailboat who had an MI, who was clinically dead. I can show you the EKG, and he survived. So I guess my ethos, as it says here, is to really think about a safety plan. This is a group of people for whom you never want to see. They should be in the background, but if you really need them, you have them. And like I said, you have to have a plan, you have to be prepared, and you have to execute. I'll stop there for a moment.
Well, that's pretty. And so, how do we plan? I mean, what do we have? Share a little bit about what we do asset-wise, and we can coordinate.
Well, you know, over the years we have evolved in our preparation for this big regatta, but I think that there's some lessons to be learned for the little club regatta. And again, we have decided to have a plan. At Race Week, what we do is we have 2 crews an EMS person, a nurse to go offshore and to service the offshore courses. And we have one in the inshore group, fully equipped, with everything from, Band-Aids all the way down to, defibs, so we can shock someone. We position ourselves such that we can get, and we have so we've been very lucky. We have the assets in terms of boats to get to where we want in a very short period of time. So we have a group of fishermen who we love and who have these, big boats with big engines, and they're willing to put up their time and to help us get around the either inshore or offshore. We have established in our notice of race or in our booklet a plan in terms of being able to call people, numbers, both to the PRO and to my cell phone, so that we can get assets, or to Randy's phone so we can get assets to where we need to be. And we this year, for the first time, which I think was a great thing, was we tried to get all the boats, all the safety boats. My impassioned plea is to get everyone who's in the regatta, whether you're a marked boat or not, because at some point you may become a safety boat, is to have a pre-regatta meeting and go over exactly what the plan is. If something happens, where are you going to take that person? What are you going to do? Are you going to take them to the yacht club, in Charleston? Or are we going to take them here, which literally the hospital is, 1,000 yards away? What are your plans? And let everyone know that. Identify everyone on the race course who is a safety boat. Make sure that those individuals have the equipment that you think that's needed for the regatta. And it depends, a big boat regatta may have different equipment than a dinghy race. I think it was 2 years ago, we lost a child on a 420, got wrapped up into a shrouds when a boat flipped over and died. So, wire cutters might be something you might have. And then just to have people who know what they're doing. I think one of the biggest mistakes, and I know Sarah Ashton's trying to do something along this line, is to try to educate those people. You get your best person to be your weather mark, but you just ask Joe Blow to be, your safety boat, and he may not know how to ride a boat. He may not know how to rescue somebody. So we really need to give some education for those individuals so that they become as good as your weather mark person, as good as your gate person. And again, it takes time, it takes communication. And I think it's worked well for us at Race Week. We've been very fortunate. The hospital has donated its time and people to us. But I can speak for my own little club in our summer regatta. We get the fire department to come, and our plan is if there's an emergency to scoop and run to the yacht club to where we have EMS on land. It doesn't take much to do that either. And I know there are lots of fire departments that have EMS that love to come sit at your yacht club for a day and eat your free food and enjoy the sun and see the good-looking women. No, I don't want to be good-looking men, depending on the perspective. But I think, I think that there are. We don't necessarily think about all those things all the time, and I would say that it's as important as your notice of race, as important as your sailing instructions.
I have to echo. I mean, what we will with Race Week, we've gotten so organized, and thank goodness that we are. But if we had sat back and we partner with the Coast Guard Auxiliary and the Coast Guard for our event as well. But I have to say that gentleman would not have survived had we relied on the Coast Guard and the local assets. If we didn't have our own act together to do it, to get to the boat and get the defibrillator to him in a timely manner, he wouldn't have survived. And I'm literally on the phone with the Coast Guard, and they're having problems starting their boat here at the Coast Guard station. And they're saying, well, call the fireboat. Well, I know that the fireboats are sitting there at the pilots. So, time is of the essence. And I think we were able to get somebody there within a few minutes. And he walked out of the hospital on Tuesday actually healthier than he, So we have a new model for race week. Come to race week, you'll leave healthier than when you were on. Yes.
I think everybody needs to take that to club too. They always got their VHS with thunderstorms and be aware that they can go to any safe, yacht club or open space that they can to get away from the thunderstorms. Because we had an incident 2 summers ago where boats were all over the place. People didn't know where their kids were because the thunderstorm popped up. And I think the instructors need to be taught, before summer programs start about what to do in these circumstances. So,
I feel like I'm talking a lot today, but I will also reveal my experience before I got into healthcare software. I've been an EMT for 10 years, and I will tell you this from the unique perspective of being an EMT and EMS supervisor in some major markets, Detroit, Washington, D.C., and being responsible for overseeing vast numbers of EMS assets. Everyone thinks about the hospital. Everyone thinks about on the water. No one thinks about from the water to the hospital. And no one typically invites EMS to come, or fire, to come and play and understand what it's like to take a patient off a boat. Please do not let, and this, for everyone, please do not let fire and EMS, your local fire and EMS assets, discover the difficulties of getting a 150-pound to 200-pound person who is unconscious off of a vessel, and discover how hard that can be on the day that they're called on to do that while giving CPR. So please interface with these groups, these local assets, and invite them out to the club. Allow them to have training days. Allow them, they love to train. All of these departments will have regular training if they're volunteer departments. If you're out in the country, most departments do trainings once a week. Bring them down to your club. Bring them down to your sailing center. There are many of these people who've never been on a boat before. Let them touch stuff, play with stuff, practice things, practice these movements so that when you're in the real thing, they know what to do.
Randy, in that vein, I need to give a plug. U.S. Sailing has information. They have a book that's pretty good. It really is a nice book for your safety boats to have. It goes from simply, what to do, whether to observe or whether to go to aid, and talks about how to write lots of little dinghies. They're to tell you a story about our club one time, we had a safety boat watch a boat literally go out through the jetties because they couldn't right the boat, and they wouldn't. Partly it was the captain of the boat's fault. He wouldn't let anyone help them do it, but he literally went out into the shipping channels, and that's unacceptable. And they were in the water for an hour and a half, and again, communication. I can't underscore communication. One of the previous topics was talking about being consistent on the radio and how identifying the countdown. Well, how many what radio frequency is everybody listening to, and how do you supersede if you're in the middle of a countdown and you've got a major problem. And I was talking to Chip Till over there. A couple of weeks ago, we ran a regatta for the Wasp. It's a foiling moth boat, and the reality is that boat literally will go 20, 25 miles an hour, and it has these spears on the bottom of it. And what do you do? How do you assure that they're going to be safe and you're going to be safe? And it's a daunting task. And do you put other boats out on the course with those wasps? And it was if that's the wave of the future for us, one only has to look at the America's Cup and see and I forget what boat it was, where that guy almost lost his ankle because it almost cut off his entire ankle. And we have Bora losing some of his fingertips on that. I mean, the speeds and the equipment is really, you know, it's really it's always been dangerous, but you know, it just adds more with the speed and the traffic that we have.
Yeah. So Randy, one of the things I like to give a plug to, you talk about education and training for your safety people, is the U.S. Safe Powerboating course. Part of their course is rescue and safety for small boats and riding small boats. And it's a really good course. In 2 days' time, you learn so much about handling not only a powerboat, but also riding boats, providing safety rescue services out on the water. So I would recommend that course to anyone that is going to be out there on the water.
If you haven't taken the race management course, be it 1 day or the 2 day in the last 2 years, I will tell you a lot of time is now dedicated toward development of a safety plan. So it's very important to U.S. Sailing. We've incorporated into the race management training. So if you haven't taken it in the last 2 years, you might want to take it, because there's a lot of good information put out at that course.
Great. And the powerboat handling course, I think, is real key, because you get, and I'm one, you know, I'm a sailor. I'm not a powerboater, you know, so I can handle a J24 or so, whatever, a lot better than I can my 22-foot Edgewater, you know.
I'll vouch for that.
Exactly. But you know, we all need that kind of help.
So if I could jump on, your comments were great. I think it's on. Yeah. I'm a retired firefighter as well, and using your local resources, we had Wilmington Fire's rescue boat on the course for the youth champs, and it turned out to be a fantastic asset. Use your local resources. Get familiar, know people in your local weather service office. I mean, they're the best resource. All these websites are somebody's interpretation from the data that they're getting from the weather service, and they don't have any skin in the game. They'll give you this. And then the one thing I would ask, or would be helpful, we've been fortunate at the Carolina Yacht Club to get an influx of new folks who are interested in safety, and they're thirsty for knowledge. And the tools we have are great, but they're kind of generic, and these high-performance boats are so specialized that it would be really nice if we could get a class liaison or each class to do a little safety video. This is how you de-rigger our boat. These are the safety problems. We try to do it before a regatta, but things just get too hectic and you can't get everybody together. So if we could have it wouldn't take a 10-minute video to say, you know, this is what you need to know about this boat when you're trying to ride it out there, would be very helpful. Thank you.
Sterling, if you want a good copy of the safety plan that the club is using, talk to Sterling and see if you can't get a copy. It's a great plan. It's got the items you need, and you can take it from there and modify it to your club's needs. But it's good. Very good.
Excellent. And I think what
should that be something that's put on, Matt, on the website?
If you go to the website and search for gallery program, safety program, there is a template there for, gallery has a template for the safety plan, and you can actually contact them and get the full-blown safety plan. They have multiple documents for junior sailing programs, a club safety plan, a template for your own 1 or 2 pager, because what the piece that you want to put in people's hands, think about having it in the hands of a 17-year-old sailing instructor. You don't want a 25-page manual. You want a 1 or 2 page laminated sheet that says, if this happens, do this and this and this and call this person. That simple.
Great. And then you know, we had something, you know, multi-small boat management, you know, and keeping track. And I think, you know, Dick's typing away, but you know, he had a good conversation. You know, it's, you know, we talk about how we keep track of everybody. And is it Toolbox that used the wristbands? Is it, you know, that they implemented that, right, to kind of keep track of the kids, you know? And, you know, he mentioned, you know, okay, we've got 2 guys missing. or two people didn't check in on the race course. Okay. Well, that's good information, but where are they? And how you figure it out. And I'm going to let you, because you did a much better job explaining that. But you have to have the next stage, of finding them. And locating
Doing a lot of youth events, I've encountered a lot of different approaches to safety, and some are really good, and some are silly and harassment, sort of. They had at one regatta, they had this beach. They were launching off a beach. They had the beach check-in. And it was a rule. You had to check in by a certain time. And I was chairman of the protest committee, and somebody came up to me and says, well, we got a little business for you tonight. 3 boats haven't checked in. And I said to him, do you know where they are? And he looked a little blank. I mean, the idea had not sunk in that the purpose of the check-in was that if they hadn't checked in, they might be in trouble somewhere. I said, you are missing the whole point. Where the hell are those boats, and why aren't you looking for them? Oh, and he took off, and 2 boats had come in and forgotten to check, and there was one out on the water, and they found them. But it just, they hadn't planned. This club hadn't planned on how they were going to use the safety information, why they were collecting it, and so on. And so this is part of your idea of having a plan. You've got to think about all the elements of it and make sure that all your volunteers are on board with it. And be careful not to do something which is silly. It makes great sense if you have to sail 3 miles to get to the course to ask the kids to check in at the race committee boat. If you're just sailing 100 yards off the beach, why bother? If they're checking out from the beach, you can see them. Don't add something unless it has real value, and don't for sure add something unless you're prepared to implement it in a clear way. If the kids have to check in at the committee boat, you tell them how to do it. Maybe you sail by the stern of the committee boat on starboard tack and hail your sail number, and then somebody on the race committee boat should wave an acknowledgement, that person with the clipboard who's writing down the numbers. But it all has to be worked out, and often it isn't. So.
Awesome. Got a plan, and then you have to execute.
Well, you got to prepare. I mean, you can have a plan, but if you don't have the people to understand what your plan is and what to do,
yeah.
I think one of the things that I learned from Race Week is that Race Week has put the assets in our safety boats. So there is a set of wire cutters in every boat, every safety boat, or one safety boat on every course. A pair of wire cutters cost $12, $15 at the hardware store, or Lowe's or whatever. Have the equipment for people, and don't expect them to come. Just a checklist for our boats. Do you have a PFD? Do you have a throwable? Do you have a tow line? It's incredible to me. There are laws that about going out, and people will go out they won't even have the right things for the state, let alone for being a safety boat. So we ought to take the time to say, here's our expectation of you before you go out. Does your engine start? There's poor Becky over there gets a phone call the morning of the race and says, my boat doesn't start. There's a great, we relied on your boat. We put you in the grand scheme of things, and your boat doesn't start. How do we replace you? The morning of a race. So get your boat to work. Make sure you have all the safety equipment, and then if the regatta has additional safety equipment that you want to have, then you make sure that those boats have it. And again, that's part of the preparation, the education that needs to be done, because as we've seen today, when everybody raises their, when I personally, I'm surprised at how many people here raise their hand, but it is amazing how many injuries we really have. And I know there's a U.S. sailing sports medical thing, which I happen to sit on, and it's amazing how many injuries there are, and how devastating some of those injuries can be for individuals.
Yeah, because we're not getting any younger either.
Well, and that's always been my concern about race week. When we look at big boats, the average age of the owner of a big boat, because of some financial issues, are not very young anymore. There are not very many. Jeremy may be on the boat, but he doesn't own that boat. He may not. There's an owner there who's probably twice your age, maybe 3 times your age. Or your age. Yes, my age. And I tell you, that was our biggest concern. And one of my biggest concerns over the years for Race Week is, what if we do have a heart attack? Can you shock somebody in a wet boat? Will the EMTs get equally shocked? I can say it didn't work. I mean, no, we shocked the person and it didn't transmit to anybody, and it worked perfectly. But it's still a concern. And as JD says, I'm not getting any younger. Absolutely.
Most of the race committee has no clue what that is or what to do.
So do you think it's worthwhile to have an identification on our registration to say, do you have any serious health issues that might impact you during the racing, so that we know?
I think that's already part of the SOP for youth events.
For youth events.
Yeah. But what about for us?
Yeah.
Or your home regatta? Yeah.
It would be great to have, but I think the problem on the water is identifying the patient, getting to that guy.
Well, I'll tell you, the gentleman that we shocked 2 years ago, we thought it was the owner of the boat who was in his.
Yeah, I was shocked. I mean, I
it was
knew
a
the owner was
50-year-old as
74
opposed to a
years old.
70-year-old.
That's what I thought he was bringing.
It was his son-in-law, but when we got over there, it was, fortunately that this was probably more than you want to know, but the boat itself was trying to do CPR, but they were very ineffective. So they did, they knew that something was going on, but they really didn't know what to do. And fortunately, the EMT boat got there within literally 2 minutes of the distress signal. So, yeah. But again, it would be nice for us to have that information. Even if you're not, usually there's someone else on the boat, who can tell us, this is the one who's got the heart issue. This is the one that's the diabetic. In an opti, it's kind of difficult.
I will tell you that I made up myself a card that I put into a waterproof packet, and whether I'm on a race committee boat or if I'm racing, I always make sure somebody knows I have this. It's in my dry bag, which is full of allergies, contact information, my course's contact information. So I make sure, I'm not going to myself. So I make sure that if I'm on somebody's boat, they know I have that information.
Well, I used to be part of the safety at sea and give the medical part. And when you go on these long journeys, you want to know your crew. You want to know what's going on and what medical needs you are. We don't do necessarily that great of a job. And I speak to my own club. People come, they pay their money, they get in their boats and they go. And we know little or nothing about many of those people. And I think, maybe just by luck or whatever, I think we just need to do a better job. I'm a very big advocate of it. I wear a life jacket every time that I race. Not that I'm racing that much anymore, but I really feel strongly about that. And but it's big. I know it's difficult on big boats to do, and but a dinghy race, and especially a youth race, most youth races require it before you can go out. But still, I think it is really important. It is incredible how little trauma can cause a head injury from a boom to knock you out and to have you in the water. We have somebody in our sailing community who fell in her bathtub and has literally been under the weather for almost a month now, and it'll probably be 6 months. And so, that, and again, there's been an interesting study from U.S. Sailing about concussions on sailboats, and it is so underreported and so sort of put, washed under, kind of put underneath that people don't worry about it, but it is a real serious problem. And just, if you look at some of the data from the football people, even minor injuries to the head can have long-term consequences. So that's another interesting question. Should we have helmets? There are a couple classes now that require helmets. The M32s require helmets to go out on them. So, and the faster these boats go, the more power they have, the more likely you are to not get hit, but not get, seriously hurt with those kinds of things. So something to think about.
Yes. Can you speak a little bit to the team, both capsized, who went through the right thing in the boat? Get it going?
Well, I think I think that goes to your statement about catering to the back half of the fleet, because I think that's where you see where a lot of the fatigue comes in. And I think, again, my personal opinion is that the PRO has to take that into consideration. Again, our ages, we're not necessarily a young person's sport. I think the racing conditions, it may be perfect, it might be 20 and perfect racing, and you want to do, that extra fourth race, but you've been out for 3 hours, and you can see that the bottom half of the fleet is just dragging, and that's when you get hurt. I really believe that. When you're tired and when you're not at your best, that's when you get hurt. And so I'm really, the other thing is I guess the youths do a little bit better than we do. We're worried about hydration status in the kids. Well, on big boats, we've got lots of beer and things that dehydrate us and again make us a little less agile. And as the day goes on, it gets worse and worse. So something to think about.
Can we get the most experienced people to answer the question he brought up about flying the Y flag? Have y'all ever felt like you needed to do that? Or have you done that? Or do you usually just kind of leave that to the crew? Based on classes, I'm sure.
West Coast, where the water is cold, where we race, particularly with youth, they are adopting as a standard, you put on your life jacket before you go on the dock, and it stays on except for brief moments to adjust clothing or whatever the rule says until you leave the dock. And that goes for all the competitors and all the race officials. I can't go judge anymore. If I want to go on the dock or go out and do Rule 54, I got to be wearing my life jacket. It's a rule. And it's just blanket. And it becomes habit, You just, okay, I'm at the regatta, put on my life jacket.
I sort of think what JD's talking about is there is a rule that if you put up the Y flag in a regatta or a race, then the competitors are required to wear a life jacket, as opposed to require them at the start. And a lot of clubs got away from raising the Y flag because they're admitting conditions are getting worse. You now have to wear a life jacket. Whereas they said at the beginning, wear a life jacket. I think that's why the Y flag was being used.
Yes.
In reference to your life jackets, I wonder how many people have actually tested their life jacket, actually got it on and went in the water with their clothes on and just hung there to see what it would do. I saw a test down in one of the national symposiums that I was shocked at how many people had life jackets on that actually put their face in the water. So just FYI, test your life jackets.
I will warn you, there's one life jacket out there that's not U.S. Coast Guard approved that will float you about here when you first go in the water, and 15 minutes later, it floats you about here. So in 15 minutes, it loses a tremendous amount of its flotation. And it's a very popular life jacket, but it's not Coast Guard approved.
Wow. Well, I don't know how aware you are, but we had a terrible accident with the Chicago Mac race this past year. And again, a marketing group of one, but I use an inflatable life jacket a lot of times, and I'm counting on that thing inflating if I fall over into the water. Well, guess what? This one didn't inflate for the guy, and this was I'm on the same course. I was just astounded when I found out at 2:30 in the afternoon, just off the Chicago lakefront, this guy passes away. He fell off a TP52, and they just couldn't get back. Rumor is that maybe it is that as he was going over, but when they did find him, the life jacket had not inflated. And so the Chicago Yacht Club's going through this big study, and recently just somebody was in last weekend, and they're saying, yeah, we did this kind of mini safety at sea seminar, and we all jumped into the pool with our inflatable life jackets, and it was like 40% of them did not inflate. Yeah. I mean, it was pretty scary, and they same experience in that they didn't know how, and then some did inflate. They didn't know how to, they didn't have the crotch straps in, so a couple of them came right off over the tops of their heads. It's really, really important that you get in the water with whatever device you're going to use, whether it's a regular jacket, just to see how it reacts and how you react. You're going to find out some of them will pull right off the top of your head.
See a lot of parents buying a life jacket.
Yeah.
Or like you pick your kid up and buy the jacket, see if it falls out of it. Way too late, but not funny. I didn't. Right now you're discussing, paddles and bigger boats, stuff like here, race. I said you would know about your perspective.
Right.
Especially like in youth events, like here's like outfit events, large outfit events, and I was talking to Ron, he had a similar thing that I did. You have an Oxy Gold and Silver Fleet, and let's say you have 90 gold kids and 50 silver kids, and you're expecting them to not go past 16, 17 knots that day. All of a sudden it's at 22 knots and big job, and half the Gold Fleet probably falling. Silver Fleet's back half is petrified that they're even there. And then you realize that while you thought there was enough support boats and people around, and the yacht club is 2 miles away, what do you do with the Silver Fleet? You want the Gold Fleet, it's a championship, let's say it's the Option States or something. You want the Gold kids to still finish their flight. Yet you can't send the Silver kids back with not enough support people. And then they're tied up with the coach boats, and maybe you're relying on the coach boats to help watch for safety on the course. And if you pull someone on the whole event, then you get an OA that doesn't understand it was a real safety issue.
Yeah.
You get chastised as a PRO, and here's what everybody does. It this happened to me, and I kind of, what do I do with the silver kids? But I can't send them back to the tying them up to whoever out on the bottom of the race course. And I thought it was my fault. I didn't plan on enough support boats, but we thought we had one.
That's every officer's worst nightmare, to be stuck in a situation like that. And it might not be very popular, but you have to default to get the bottom half of the fleet in. And if that means everybody goes in, everybody goes in. It's you got to look at it from the worst case sometimes. And so you know, what I would do, I would send everybody in and just take the flak for it.
Interesting things is you know, as we promote like high school sailing, you know, we have we extend our season into the cold water periods of time, and you know, we don't have or some of the kids don't have the right equipment to go out in cold water. So one of the solutions that somebody had, and I think is a great idea, is to have a swap. Actually bring all your extra equipment, you know, things that you've outgrown out, or, you know, things, and just swap things out so that if Johnny doesn't have the right life jacket because mom bought one 2 years, he or she can get one that's the right size, or dry suit, or a spray suit, because again, hypothermia is really one of those things that are really insidious and quick to happen. And I don't know that we pay as much attention to it as, you know, the big boats we don't, you know, generally don't worry about until you fall off, but the dinghies, and, you know, our club is having a frostbite today. You know, the water temperature is 50 degrees. How many of those kids are going out in shorts as opposed to, you know, a dry suit or a wetsuit or a spray suit?
And how quick could they hypothermia set in?
Well, it depends on the water temperature, but it can be literally 15 to 30 minutes.
And remember, you don't have to be actively capsized in the water to get hypothermia. You can just be there hiking, getting water washing you over every 5 seconds.
You know, the wind chill is a convection, and is a real reason that people do get
hypothermia while sailing a boat is a real thing. You don't have to be capsized, you know, in the water.
And it can take you completely by surprise before you realize it.
Well, it's insidious. You know, your reflexes start to slow down a little bit. Your judgment changes, and before you know it, you know, you're really in trouble.
And this is something where the individual cannot identify it themselves. This is where the coaches and the race officers really has to keep an eye on the kids and kind of watch their posture, watch their actions in the boat as they go sailing by you. That, you know, 14-year-olds are kind of dopey as a baseline, but if there's a kid that's particularly spaced out, call him over and say, how you doing? And if he gives you a particularly bad answer, you know, man, he call his coach over and take him off the water.
On the subject of life jackets, from a competitor's perspective, it's weight on the boat, and you'll notice a lot of the very top teams understand that you want that weight to be on your body rather than in the bilge. So for race management, don't hesitate to put up the Y flag and make people wear their life jackets. It's actually a competitive advantage to have it on your body rather than bouncing around down below.
Thank you.
Right. Well, let's hop on to weather, which we just started about, wind chill and all that. Well, let me back up, I guess, a little bit. You know, I think that our ability to forecast and the weather forecasting today is, you know, eons ahead of what we've had 5, 6, even 6 years ago. I know that, I don't know how many local yacht clubs have, you know, large chart plotters on their signal boats that have Wi-Fi weather that gives real-time weather. Do you have, you know, relationships with local weather forecasters that, I can tell you a funny story. Years ago, I'm a big fan of Commander's Weather. So I'm sitting here in the race committee room at Race Week, and I'm talking to Ken Campbell up in New Hampshire about what I'm going to do with the race today, you know, for tomorrow, you know, and getting the forecasting. And week later, 2 weeks later, ran into, well, we have a NOAA office here, you know, with a local guy who actually knows the local conditions. And so, you know, you're much better off, you know, trying to find your local resource for weather and forecasting. None of us, I don't think that I'm here, are actual weather people that I know. and so, we all think we can second guess it and figure it out. But I think it's always really great to be able to reach out to a professional. I mean, what are they? They're right 50% of the time, or something. It's a great job, you can be wrong 50% of the time and be successful, but it's important, to be able to hold these races. And, if you've got a monkey forecast, it's tricky to do. I mean, I know we've had to, we've got 200 and some boats that we have to get out of the water. And, we've got to make that call, what's going to happen at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Instead of trying to squeeze the race off in the morning, we know we've got to get 200 boats out of the water before it hits. So I'm going to throw that, what other people do for, their weather and weather forecasting.
But I have a question. How many of us have sailed when you hear thunder in the background? So the question is do we have any parameters in terms of how close, a lightning strike is, or hearing thunder, or, I will tell you that the local high schools all have these little contraptions, and when lightning is around, the horn goes up and they stop the football game or the whatever soccer game, and they wait for that storm to go by. I've been out many a day, you can see lightning somewhere, or you hear thunder, and so should we have some parameters? Should that be part of our, if there's a lightning strike within 5 miles of where you're racing, is it 3 miles? What's anyone's experience in that?
TSA has a standard rule of 10 miles. 20 miles, you start paying attention. 10 miles, everyone's off the water. And there was an accident, it was a number of years ago. A lady was in Colorado, and the skies were crystal clear. Thunderstorm was on the other side of the mountain. Lightning strike went over the top of the mountain and came down and killed her. So she didn't even hear it. No thunder. It was a clear air lightning strike, which happens more often than not. But the TSA has a 10-mile rule, and everyone's off. And I get very concerned about that because the J70s and the Meldus 24s have carbon rigs, which make an aluminum rig look like a non-conductive piece of material. So 10 miles is at a minimum of 10 miles, people are coming off the water.
I agree with that. I use 10 miles also. If you are fortunate enough to have a harbor pilot group in your area that you're sailing, make friends with them. I call them all the time. They will call me when I'm on the water and let me know you got a squall coming up. It's down at Edisto. It's headed for us. You got about 30 minutes before it hits here. It's great relationship to have.
Yeah, I agree with the 10-mile radius. The Opti class has a standard policy that if there's visual lightning, take the kids off the water. There are a couple of really good weather apps that you can get that have lightning detectors built in. One is called Spark. It'll actually notify you, and you can set parameters in a diagram and a circle, and it'll tell you as it's approaching. So it's very, very effective. Weather bug, yeah.
The military, Army particularly, and Marines, have a 10-mile lightning thing, and they shut things down. They even shut down the indoor pool at Paris Island when I was under, if there was lightning in it.
I use Storm Radar. That's another good app.
So by the show of hands, there is no consistency in this group, at least.
No, I think the 10 miles.
I think some of us have
10 miles.
What I'm saying is that I think that's a good rule. We need to affect that rule among our,
But you also think that you look at this, and JD knows in our situation, typically after the thunderstorm, we have to set rules to get back home. So 10 miles is way too short for us. We have to understand. So I think it's a good standard, but you need to tweak it.
You too.
Yeah, right. On the Panhandle coast of Florida, you'll get a thermal breeze in the afternoon, and you'll get the follow-up thunderstorms inland, and you can see them, you can hear them, and there's lightning. They aren't coming your way because the sea breeze is keeping them pushed inland. And you wouldn't get a race off in the afternoon. You keep an eye on it for sure, but 10 miles would be way too close.
Too close or too far? I'd rather get back on shore and everybody says JD is not knowing what he's doing than to pick up the paper the next day and say, 4 people were killed by lightning. Yeah.
What I heard, 20 miles is a good, really need to work with your data, pay attention, gather information, use all your resources, and make a decision.
I'm going to be wrong either way. I'd rather be wrong than out there.
He wrote a 0 and back again.
Yes.
I'm listening to this conversation and it strikes me, since I have a lot of children, that how we judge our children, we do not hold ourselves to that same standard. So your kids have U.S. Sailing certified instructors on first or second day. Your child is in that water with a life jacket on and they're seeing whether it's coming up and up. Kids have, every yacht club in the world says your foot is on the deck or on the pier, whatever you guys call them, we call them piers. That life jacket is on. Not only the kids who are in sailing school, but the little siblings that the moms are dragging behind. Our race committee in youth, I think your state is probably just like mine. At a track meet, if you hear thunder, you are in for an hour. If you see lightning, you are in for 2 hours. And we're so careful with our youth. But then we don't do that with our adults. And our adults kind of bristle in that, I really know what's good for me. And yet it puts this race committee in kind of a crummy, where you have to make a good judgment all the time. We were talking about clothing, and John Strassman was there with me in Pewaukee for the USODA team trials. And I don't think we wrote it into the NOR, but every parent from down south who came to Pewaukee knew that they needed to have the right kind of dry suit for their children. And
didn't we send out a special notice saying you're going to be sailing in a lake that was hard 2 weeks ago? I mean, literally, it was we were sweating getting the piers in, right? I mean,
came with the right gear. We did what was right because they were children, and yet we're afraid to make that same kind of judgment. And I think the risk is the same. Oh my goodness, if somebody dies because of something I did, and he's the president of such and such, oh my goodness, that family's the breadwinner. The risk is still there. So why do we do that for ourselves? We all do.
That's a good point.
Well, we usually do it in general at the regatta, and we'll have youth and we'll have older sailors and with different classes and stuff. And I usually at the skipper's meeting, I put out if it's one of those days that we know we're going to have some storms moving in, I'll tell them then that, if I get a lightning strike at 10 miles or closer, we're coming back in. And that way I've already set their expectations. When they see it, they know, okay, well, I know what's going to happen. And sometimes it does blow by and everything's great, and that's okay. I won't see it in the paper tomorrow. But if it goes the other way, I'll see something in the paper.
That's great. Got to keep moving. Matt, you want to take this or I'll start it?
Sure. Whichever you like.
Okay. So we've got all these race officials in here. Has everybody done their safe sport? All raise your hand if you've done your safe sport. Well, you're okay. All right.
All right, so Safe Sport is a 90-minute athlete protection program that was mandated by the U.S. Olympic Committee and managed by the Center for Safe Sport, which is the sole authority for the management and reporting of incidents of abuse against any athlete, adult or child. It's required of each of the Olympic national governing bodies in the United States is required to have some of their members trained, depending on who's on a on the so-called covered individuals list. So the U.S. Sailing Board of Directors agreed and required that directors, staff, members of the Olympic Sailing Committee, all instructors, all race officials, safety at sea moderators, people who are in a position of authority over athletes or who have frequent and direct contact with athletes must take the training. It's, as I said, it's a 90-minute online course that involves some videos and short testing. It's not difficult, it's educational, and the requirement was that all race officials be trained by the end of 2018. So actually, of the 950 race officials, we have now about 55 or 60 who still haven't done it. And it's been we've had a big push by the local folks and by the office to get everybody done. Unfortunately, the Center for Safe Sport is kind of building the plane while flying it, and the requirements continue to evolve. When we put out the original notice in March last year, the requirement was that it be renewed every 24 months. They've now changed that, and now we need to do it every 12 months. So before long, you'll get an email from me saying, thank you for getting this done, and now I have to tell you that you're going to need to do this every year. The refresher course is quicker. I think it's a half-hour refresher rather than a 90-minute course, but you need to do it before your one-year period elapses. Otherwise, you got to go back to the beginning and start again. So
do they send notices to you, or do you send notices?
We actually send notices. We have an automated notice system that will send it out on a regular basis saying, don't forget, you have to do this before this date. This is unfortunate, but it's unfortunate that the things that have brought us to this point have happened. People say, well, this is ridiculous. Why are you requiring this? You're just making more hoops for us to jump through. Well, my answer is usually Penn State, USA Gymnastics, Michigan State. This is the world we live in, unfortunately. Nobody thinks that our race officials are going out there and abusing children. That's not the point. The point is that it's important that we all know, be able to recognize this kind of inappropriate behavior and be able to interfere with it or report it to prevent abuse of kids and adult athletes. The other reality is that their background checking is coming. It will be required of all of us. It's at least middle of the year at this point, but like so many other things that we do, I'm sure in your communities, if you want to volunteer for a school team, you want to go and volunteer for scouts, you need to take the athlete protection program. You need to get background checked. And it's a part of our world as well. So I think the positive way of looking at it is it's something that we can do to prevent the kind of horror stories that we've heard in other sports. Fortunately, I'm sure it's not wood, but that I'm knocking on, but we've had very little problem in sailing, certainly that we're aware of. And I think we believe reasonably there has been very little of this. USA Gymnastics is now no longer exists. You may be aware it's gone out of business. And the folks athletes who were hoping to qualify for the Olympics are in this horrible spot now. They have no national governing body to help manage their sport. So we want to make sure that we never have a situation like that. I'm happy to answer any questions.
It is free.
It is free.
And not U.S. sailing, it is U.S. law at this point. But not the U.S. sailing agreement, every entity has to be part of it.
Matt, what about the background check? Is that going to cost the individual, or who's going to cover that cost?
That is the question. If we think about close to 1,000 officials who need to get background checked once a year, typically at a minimum price of $20.
Oh, that's cheap.
Yeah, that's very cheap. It can be 35 or more.
It can be more than that.
I don't have $20,000 or $35,000 in the budget to pay for that. So I know that There are folks, Lee Parks is one of the people who's doing a lot of work with the Center for Safe Sport. We're trying to figure out how to do this. At this point, my guess is the responsibility will be on the officials. I'm very sensitive to the issue that our race officials go out and, unlike officials in most other sports, go out and volunteer their time. They travel on their own dime. I should say I do it as well. And I'm aware that asking folks to do more and pay for more is a burden on people. I don't have a solution for that problem.
Imagine you go to anybody that's a U.S. County member, and we have a lot of folks up in the Northeast that are requiring anybody that's involved in their program, not their instructors, which you have to have.
Right.
Anybody that's a member can go to state sport. So we try to keep folks that are requiring anybody that's involved in their program to their trustees.
All right, you sign up on the Safe Sport dashboard, make sure you put your U.S. Sailing number in. That way, when you complete the training, it sends notification to us, and that winds up in your record in our database, so that we know that you're Safe Sport trained.
I just want to do it.
Taking it for another organization.
If you go into the dashboard and add U.S. Sailing and your member number, then it reports to us the same way. So one training is good for multiple sports. Yeah. Dan?
I coach a high school team that requires background. We've been doing this for over 10 years. First off, this is a much easier course. I tell you, the other ones, it took me an entire day course, and they required a monthly website questions and reading. And that required a background check. The question is that there are other programs out there that coaches like myself are experiencing. So, has there been any thought of joining these programs together? I mean, I've already been background checked.
Right. To my knowledge, the Center for Safe Sport is not contemplating accepting anything other than Safe Sport training. And they're not mandating the provider for background checking, that they're leaving that to the NGB. So we've contracted with a company called Hire Image that does this for companies for hiring. We believe we've gotten one of the better deals in the country, but we can't institute it, we can't implement it until Safe Sport is clear about what they're requiring of us. So it'll be at least it'll be at least July before we see actual action on that, I think.
Is there any way we can admit to certain errors in our background before you get there? Or?
Yeah. Happily, when I got background check, they didn't discover my connections with any Russian oligarchs.
Don't talk to your first wife.
No, the first dick.
Have we established a mechanism for requiring this among the many coaches who are now being hired, including private coaches? So
it's required of anybody who carries the U.S. Sailing certification. Any coach, any instructor, anybody who's certified, any race official, anybody who's certified by us.
But we certify coaches.
We do.
I know we certify instructors.
And coaches. Coaches as well.
Yes. To me, the coaching industry seems to be an informal private thing that has sprung up.
Not all coaches who you will find on the water are U.S. Sailing certified. But so obviously we don't have any leverage over those who are not certified by us.
You have leverage. There's now rules for support persons. So it's conceivable you could say that you must register, if you're accompanied by a coach or parent, you must register that parent, that person, and then that would give you leverage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, okay. So
if you wrote it in the notice of race.
With the U.S. Sailing Youth Championships and Junior Championships, we have been hand-to-hand combat with coach certification that U.S. Sailing has, I don't even, but they have very specific training and certification requirements to become a U.S. Sailing certified coach. Fairly high bar. And many coaches in high school and yacht club programs have not gone through the program. And so finally, I believe, if I'm wrong about this, but I believe you have to be a category 3 coach to be on the water at a U.S. sailing junior / youth event. It's been like 10, 15 years to get to this point.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of independent contractor coaches who aren't certified, and they don't want to go through the U.S. sailing program. And and they're very good coaches, but it's been contentious to
And
get
you're
to
right.
this point.
You're right. The requirement now, and has been for 2 or 3 years at least, is that we require level 3 coach certification for any qualifier or championship.
Yeah.
I was a junior coordinator for years ago, and there weren't any requirements as far as what I found. I did see sexual abuse, physical, verbal abuse, and then what we found out is that the clubs hire their sailing instructors. They're not reading all the information. They're not reading the flag concept on that application. And I know that happened here because I read after the fact an instructor we had in this area who the person that wrote on there said, psychological problems. I would not hire this person to work with children. He had already been hired here. He had already been working here. There was evidence of some of the abuse. But what I'm asking the class to do is check out, read those resumes. You might want it might sound real good of all the things you've done, but read what the other, read those resumes. Find out what parents have said, what other kids have said. Read those. Because it sounds good, looks good on paper, but if you don't know that person, there's some things that you need to know.
Yeah, if I could speak to that a little bit. Of course, U.S. Sailing doesn't have any real leverage over club hiring policy. Many clubs require that all of their instructors and coaches be certified by U.S. Sailing. And a lot of people are curious, of course, about background checking. They want to know what the system is looking for and what they would report. We think we've done a pretty good job of being clear about what the system is looking for, and it's generally any felony conviction going back typically 7 to 10 years. I think there's some to be determined aspect to that. Obviously, any kind of abuse, sexual abuse or physical or emotional abuse. And when the reporting agency reports back to us with a red flag, they're not going to, the information doesn't get spread all over the place. It comes back to us as a red flag. And there is one person in our organization who has the authority to then see that report and discuss that internally with our HR person. So we've actually built an entire sort of a flow chart of how this gets dealt with. If I were to get a report of somebody who's applying to be a race official and we got a red flag on them, we built in safeguards so that the person has the opportunity to explain what that was about. And obviously something like an active felony conviction in the last 2 years is going to be very different from somebody who, maybe got busted for having marijuana 15 years ago. Those are very different situations. And we've also built in an appeals process so that there's due process all along the way. And we also anticipate that we will get very few red flags on people who apply. I think a lot of folks, they know these things are in their background and they know they're going to be background checked, they don't apply. At least we hope that's the way it works. We'll see.
Randy, I like to comment on this subject, if I may. With all due respect, myself is just wanting to be a club race officer, what I want to do, so I can run some races. U.S. Sailing for years now has kept putting, and I understand it's a little piece at a time. If you have to go through the safe sport, it's free. You say an hour and a half, I say about 2.5 hours. But it's just starting to add up. And I understand that the people who have, particularly people who have control over youth programs or have a lot of interaction with competitors, that they might need that kind of training. But for me to go out and set a course, I don't see why I need to do that. I think U.S. Sailing needs to do a little pushback to the Olympic Committee and say, we don't have to have everybody who's U.S. Sailing certified in every category go through this training. If it's applicable, yes. If it's not, I do this like damage, and I go through this kind of training for my work. I get background checked all the time. I get drug screened all the time. Why do I have to do this for U.S. Sailing? Just to go out and run a race on my local course.
I understand your point. I've had this conversation with a lot of folks over the last year. The answer is, in the end, pushback against what is now federal law is not likely to be very effective. The USOC and the Center for Safe Sport mandate this. It's not a requirement that we dreamed up to put on race officials. I do understand that we ask more and more, but I think, doing this once a year is just something that we have to do. And I don't have any answer for that other than it's out of our control.
Well, now it's once a year instead of every 2 years, and I think you're going to start losing race officials.
It's federal law. I mean, I
understand it's federal law.
And the reality is, again, of the 950 people under my area, race officials, I have about 50 who at this point have not completed the training, and everyone who is an active race official who hasn't completed it has their certification suspended. So I don't know what else to say.
It's not federal law that I have to have this to run a race. It's federal law that I have to have this because of my association with USA.
Yes, but the effect is the same.
Run races and don't want to be certified. There's some pretty good race officers that aren't certified. You don't have the U.S. Sailing insurance.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, it is unfortunately the world we live in.
Well, let's go to umpiring after that.
Something happy.
Yes.
Something happy. A yellow flag.
It's a
happy color.
Hey, they gave me the microphone. Well, umpiring is actually, on the water umpiring is something that has evolved out of the competitors' requests. Competitors wanted an alternative to racing all day and then coming to a protest room at the end of the day to maybe find out that they're going to be DSQ'd or, their score is going to be affected. So they didn't want their time wasted. They wanted some consistency and so they asked.
Which line?
Here.
Battery ran out, huh? Okay. So in order to not have their day's worth of racing not count for anything and to have consistency in getting the rules applied out there on the course, they asked to have on the water umpiring. So basically all U.S. Sailing match racing events are umpired. Team racing events are now umpired. And we're having fleet racing being umpired on various occasions. We have the Resolute Cup run out of New York Yacht Club that is fleet race umpired. The Lipton Cup on the West Coast is fleet race umpired. And there's other fleets that have either requested their races be umpired or they're experimenting with having umpires out there so that they can know exactly when the race is finished and people cross the line, they know exactly where they have placed in that race. They don't have to generally come back to the protest room at the end of the day unless there's some serious damage that occurred out there or other situations other than a Part 2 rule infraction that occurred. So it's kind of let everybody enjoy the party after the racing is over, so to speak. So that's how it's got started. We're having more and more fleet race umpiring training that's taking place, because one of the things that we've been talking about all day is consistency. So how do you get consistency from New York to California? You've got to have some training programs that people can get involved with and have some common threads of education. So we're developing criteria now for fleet racing umpiring, because that's sort of the last discipline that has come up recently that we're starting to get people the education, the training, and certification in. So I guess I'll open it up for questions or counterpoints. Sarah's quick to.
I'd just like to know what the competitors think about this and what you think the impact is going to be on y'all.
For me, I would want every single regatta I do umpired on the water. It's one of the least like things. Like every owner I ever sail with, and especially regattas now that I do, where owners have to go into the room. You can't have their crew go in. It is maybe the worst thing an owner wants to do in a regatta. And so what that leads to is people just pulling out a protest. So, and you end up with owners not wanting to protest, and then, then another boat gets off, and it just leads to more stuff on the water, where on the water umpiring, the relationships stay good and it gets solved out there, and you come in and enjoy yourself. And it's just positive. I don't see a turn down from it, anything negative.
I just did the Far 40 Worlds. We had umpiring. Problem was, if the umpires didn't see it, it was a clean foul. So it took all the ability to protest after the fact out, and the umpires were not in the right spot on 2 occasions where we were screaming and hollering 30 seconds before, but they couldn't get there. And so it was green flagged, and both of them were egregious enough. If our helmsman hadn't been sort of after it, there would have been pretty large collisions. And that they were both green flagged, and now we were kind of out of opportunity to do anything. So it wasn't very effective.
I've actually been in a situation like that too, and I'm still for it. I think there should be a way still on the shore to bring it up. Mm-hmm. But the umpire, I got port and starboard, and the umpire, when he looked up, the boat hit us so hard that we spun that boat onto starboard. And so when the umpire looked up, it looked like a windward leeward. And so we actually got fouled. Mm-hmm. So I've still been on a bad edge of that, but I still think it's so much better for the owners and the sailors to just get it done on the water.
Well, like I said, this is sort of in its infancy, at least the fleet race umpiring pieces of it. So unfortunately, we maybe have people out there who haven't gone through all the training that we would like them to have. They haven't received the help, I guess, that they need to know how to position themselves, where to be, what to look for. So those are all things that we'd like to do on the umpire committee this year. We want to make sure that we've got education and a manual for fleet race umpiring in addition to the matching team. We've got those. We've been doing that for a long time. That's been established. So World Sailing has just recently come out with Addendum Q for their medal racing on the water fleet race umpiring. At U.S. Sailing, we want to take a look at, okay, we need something for something other than medal racing. So let's take Addendum Q. What do we need to change? What do we need to make it practical for our fleet racing? And we hope we get to the point where we've got people out on the water who know where to position themselves, that are in those pressure point areas, that can make those calls. And I agree totally that if you've got an umpire that didn't see the incident, you should still be able to take it back to the room. That's something that I think we should, as competitors, please push for that. Make sure, we're here for you. We want to give you the type of racing that you want to have. If you want to still have the option to take it into the room at the end of the race, and I think we need to make that voice heard.
I have a question. I'm familiar with the umpire fleet racing for fairly small fleets, like 10 boats. Like Mark and Cameron, how many boats were in this fleet that you were talking about? I mean, I would think that it might be a asset problem if you have 30, 40 boats out there. That's a lot of umpires you need.
Far 40 had 14 boats, and they'd use umpiring with a 10-boat fleet, and it worked quite well. With 14 boats, the umpires just sort of said, we don't have enough boats to monitor it all. They also wanted to do an umpiring race in a J70 fleet one time with 70 boats, and I objected to it because I wouldn't have had enough room to put J70s on the course with all the umpire boats on the course.
Yeah, it has its place. It serves purposes. It's really good for 12 boats and under. We've got umpire positioning developed for that. If you start getting over 12 boats, it does become a little bit more to manage out on the race course, and we may not be able to manage it as well.
I kind of think you only ever need 3 boats, one going up the middle and 2 out to the sides. And the competitors are not asking you to see every situation. Like we said, we can still come to the room. But the majority of it happens at the top and the bottom line. And it's in these big fleets is where you need it the most. So if 40 boat fleets, 70 boat fleets, if you have 3 boats at the top mark watching everyone come into the diamond, you'll get the majority of them and you'll keep the fleet in check. It's when there's nothing out there and no one's in check that this starts to happen, and there's anarchy and collisions up there, and no owner wants to go into the protest room, and everyone seems to talk their way out of the situation on land, and you feel guilty. But I would never see a situation where you need more than 3, and with like I said, you will miss some situations, but you'll get the majority of them, and it's a lot better than the alternative.
That's good feedback to know. Thanks.
I think what Jeremy's saying is true. We've done a lot of big regattas, and the tendency has leaned towards boats just not protesting, and unfortunately, it's led to some unfair racing. When we ask these owners to go into the protest room, it's just not. People just don't want to do it, and so I think with like Jeremy said, 3 boats, catch people at the weather mark, and some places up the beat, and at the turns, you're apt to get 80% of the interaction. And if we can minimize, what happens is, as soon as people start thinking they can get away with breaking all the rules, and nobody protests, there are no consequences, and it really can get out of hand. And I think in the upper levels of small keelboat racing, it has gotten out of hand. We do the August 20 Worlds, and we had 60 boats and 12 races with 0 protests. And that's just not fair sailing.
I'd like to add too to the judges, don't be afraid to get up into the mix. When I'm judging team racing, if somebody's coming at me and I'm driving the boat, or put my hands up and say I'm not partial, I'm not materially, judging I'm not affecting anybody intentionally. All too often we see judges follow the fleet in the back, and some poor sap in 57th gets flagged for pumping. I mean, that's not the guy that you're after. Go ahead and get up in there. And as a competitor, if I have to avoid a judge, or an umpire, that's part of the game. And that's the price you pay to have fair sailing, is that every now and then you're going to have to make a duck or something like that. We're not talking about a 40-foot protector. We want a 15-foot rib or something like that. But get up in there, and probably the top 3 have enough space, but it's like 5th through 25th is utter chaos. And a lot of times, like John was saying, there are people that come in on port and tack at the weather mark, and what are the odds of getting protested? They're like, the odds are maybe 10% of actually somebody following through with the protest, so I'll just go ahead and do it.
Yeah, so I'd be curious to hear from Mark if he felt like his umpires were behind the action, because that happens frequently. People are worried they don't want to give boat wake, or, they're following the fleet instead of, you have to match the fleet as they go up around the course. You've got to match them so that you're not falling behind and then having to, maybe gun it to go see an event, that situation that's going to develop. So you really do have to be in the mix on that course, and you do have to be with the boats. And some people aren't necessarily real comfortable with that. So that's part of the training. We have to get people comfortable with that.
Mm-hmm.
Match the boat speed for speed. Be with them. Go around the course with them.
It doesn't bother me as a competitor at all if I have to make a little bit of evasive action for a judge boat.
Well, and I think the competitors will tell you if you're in the way.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I have a question for Mark. Mark, how many how many umpire boats were on the course for 14 par 40s? Three. And did they have those were the same judges that were on shore? It was a world championship.
They didn't have anything to do on shore.
Okay.
They came to the shore. It was a redress maybe if they wanted to hear something, but they didn't hear any protest on shore.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say, sorry. The downside of this, and I'll address that right off the bat, is it does add costs for the OA. So that's one of the things that it's a little bit of a hurdle. We've got to get OAs to feel comfortable with adding the cost of putting power boats out there, and the gas that it costs to run those power boats. But I think with your voices, if you like that, if that's what you want to see, I think we can convince the OAs that small addition of cost for putting the boats out there, for getting the people, you're going to have the people whether they're in the protest room or on the water. So hopefully your people costs aren't going to go up significantly. So it's just that cost of getting the equipment out there. If we can get them to agree to that and think that that's worth the effort, that would be what I think our next step is, to get people used to incorporating that cost into their event.
We utilized on-water umpiring for the last two editions of the Invitational Cup in New York with 20 or 19 Swan 42s with 4 different umpire teams. And it was very effective. It pretty much kept the action on the water. There were a few downsides. We figured they probably got about 70% of the calls from the competitors. So it was a big steep learning curve. It is intensively expensive. We also worked under Addendum Q. And one of the issues from the race management perspective on Addendum Q is it does take away some of the race committee ability to provide redress if there's an error. Everything has to go through the umpires, and if the umpires don't see it, you can't file for redress. So there's no race committee actions at all with regard to redress for a competitor if we make a bad call. So the only thing that we could do is we could abandon a race. That was the only ability for the race committee to solve a problem. So that's what, if Addendum Q could be modified to at least reinstate race committee actions, that would be a great change to Addendum Q.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I guess I'm going to speak against the tide here. If we're not getting protests at regattas, there's a pretty simple fix. Judges may protest. If judges had some guts and we wanted to change the sport, I think we could do it really fast. Go out and observe without, just observe. And if there is a foul, which it clearly is a foul where somebody has broken a rule and nothing is done about it, protest both boats. Protest the boat that was in the wrong and protest the boat that did not protest under Rule 2, with the threat that if that is repeated, it will be a Rule 69. We have a fundamental rule in our sport which says we are a self-governing sport. This at least gives us the hope that we can run the big fun events that we like to run without this incredible layer. You try organizing a race with a dozen umpire boats. You've got to get a dozen working, volunteered ribs that Plus, you've got to get there. Now they want 2 umpires in each boat. Okay, you got to get 28 people to volunteer and coordinate that group. You're going to turn what is a vanishing sport into a quickly going down the drain sport. And now you make if you say, oh, it's just for the big events, the professional events, they're the ones that need it. Nonsense. They know the rules, and they don't have to send the owner who may not know the rules in as their representative. They can go into the protest room as a representative. It doesn't cost the owner a damn thing. He can continue to party and fire the coach when he loses a bunch of protests or the pro. I think the sport is losing its guts, and it's going to become a smaller sport faster. And I think I'm in the backwater. I am on the World Sailing. I've managed to get myself on the World Sailing Committee that's writing the rules for umpired fleet racing. And I'm fighting hard to make sure that we retain the basic principle and don't turn fleet racing into what match racing has become, which I think is a travesty of the basic principle. There's no foul unless somebody protests in match racing. So I'm hoping we can keep at least what we have in team racing, where the protest is initiated by the protesting boat, and there is an opportunity for the protested boat to take a circle voluntarily, and if he does not, then if the umpires penalize him, it'll be a double penalty, 2 circles. That's what my goal is, or whether I succeed in that, I don't know. I think there's a tendency to want to keep that for umpired fleet racing. But I think umpired fleet racing should be reserved for these, I think, ill-advised sports where spectators are supposedly important and an immediate result is needed to satisfy the sponsors and spectators. That's the tail wagging the dog. The dog is all of us who race locally and do it for fun as a sport and are proud of the old tradition that we follow the rules and help to enforce them on our own.
Thank you. I think that was very well said.
Did you?
I agree.
Sarah? Arbitration wouldn't be needed if you're doing on the water umpiring, but because well,
the reason we like what I'm hearing is the reason we like the on the water umpiring is because nobody has to go to protest. Arbitration is, a much simpler than it's old to me anyway, has a much simpler, quicker, easier, and less painful experience than
it does have its limited uses, though. So you can't take every incident to arbitration. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I have an observation. When we teach judges, basic level and advanced even, we always get into a discussion about seeing something happen on the water. Is it our job to protest the boat? And there's always been a lot of consideration on, well, we don't want to create this us and them environment that we're out there to, basically punish those that weren't willing to follow the rules and protest. But I'm hearing from some competitors that they believe that that's a good thing. So which way is it, or is it both ways? Are we developing into another twist in this thing? Where are we going?
Remember, JD, the race committee is out there and hired by the OA. They're our boss. If the boss doesn't want you to get involved in it, then you don't get involved in it. It's a question you have to ask the OA prior to the event. Right. Do you want us out there filing protests when we see incidents? If they don't, then you don't. If they say do what you feel is comfortable with, then you can. Right. But remember, we report to the OA as our primary boss.
Right. Kind of, I guess specifically where I was going with this was I heard from that end that the competitors like the idea of fleet racing. And I'm just wondering if there's competitors that rather keep it the way they are, or are we moving in that direction? You're our customers. Which way, where are we going? What do you all like? Are there conditional likeness? I mean, under these conditions, we want fleet, under these, we want to keep it the way it is now.
But you know, if Judge wants to be out of the water, then they should do the judge. That's why it's a criminal law. Then there's no reason for you to be on the water, no reason for the boat out of the water, no reason. People are going to come to you with your. If you want to be a judge, you want to go on the water. It seems to me you should do some judging. That means judging what bad things are happening out there. That's my opinion. Otherwise, there's no reason, at least in my opinion, for you to be out.
We'll correct those opinions after the meeting.
Hey, Steve.
I mean, I think that the goal is to try to keep the race committee and the judges out of the racing as much as possible. Unfortunately, you know, what we've done is vilified protesting each other. It has become, you know, far too personal, and so people don't want to do it. We got to a point where there was so many protests in the pro sailing. There were so many protests going on every single day because the pros were going in and fighting it out, that a lot of these classes changed their class rules to make it to where the owners had to go into the protest room. And so that's why the class rules were changed to try to minimize some of the protests. But in doing that, we've gone so far the other way that now we're not protesting and people are getting away with a lot of, you know, different things. And so bringing judging onto the water, you know, if they see incidents that are blatant and nothing is happening, that's what we're looking for, is to help minimize, you know, the loss. I think that having a judge step in a questionable situation and make a call is almost worse than not making a call at all. You know, we don't want you to, you know, you're seeing it. If it's blatant and it's easy to determine, it's something that should be pointed out. And I think that, you know, to Dick's point, if the judges come out and they start protesting, I think that's what we're looking for. If it's, you know, done in the wrong way, I've certainly been on the other side of it where umpires have come in and made calls that were wrong. And where the competitor that was supposedly fouled even said, no, you didn't foul me, it was fine. And so it's definitely a careful situation where we don't want to have you guys interject too much, but you know, we need to try to keep some balance and keep the sailing fair. And if the competitors can't do it, you know, I think that's where the umpiring comes in.
So I've seen a lot of different attitudes. I started as a deputy in the rules. But have we outgrown that? Have we outgrown this idea of a Corinthian sport in sportsmanship and gentleman rules? And maybe that's the way it is. Maybe that's the way it has to be with referees and umpires. But is there another sport that's in the same quandary that sailing is in? I can think of tennis. I'm not a tennis player. Golf, horse racing, whatever. Any other sports you might call money sports, because sailing is a money sport when you get into the upper echelons, or the time and effort involved. Is there another sport that's fighting the same problem? I ask you gentlemen at the head table, you're in a position to know, and I don't know.
I don't know about other sports. I know golf is self-policing supposedly, and I haven't. There's a lot of professional golf going on, and they seem to be surviving. But it's, of course, it's a very different game. I believe that our sport goes in waves. I think I call them sociological or cultural waves. I've been in a fleet where rules infringement was rampant, and a group of us got together and decided that we didn't like that. And the question was, should we take up another class or fix our fleet? And we decided that we would establish a protest procedure that was quick and easy. And as a group, this little group of half a dozen, would start actively protesting and then having quick hearings on the dock for these protests. And the fleet turned around in a matter of couple of evenings of racing. All of a sudden, people were doing circles, and back to where they ought to have been. It was easy. People say that it's impossible. I've seen it. I've seen a J-24 fleet that was just bumper cars. And the same sort of thing. The fleet leaders decided to turn it around, and they did, and it's remained quite good for some years. I've also seen good fleets degenerate. And I think there are techniques for turning around rule enforcement within your group. You just have to have the guts to do it. And it seems like you're being a goody two shoes, and you're infringing. You're risking a lot to assert yourself in that way within the fleet. But in my experience, you can do it, and you can succeed, and your sport is returned to a point where you don't need what is, to me, it's just going out of sight, the number of umpires needed. I umpire team racing, and I enjoy that. And I did a lot of team racing, and I know that it's so rules intensive that if you relied on protests, there basically wouldn't be team racing. And it's fun to umpire team racing, and in the sport in the spirit in which it's done. And it's a great game. But for the bulk of our sport is the discipline called fleet racing. And we want to be able to do that with a fleet of 70 boats, as you do here in your race week on one line, or on one fleet anyway, and with all sorts of skill levels. And imagine if you had to umpire this race week, Randy, what would happen to your budget? And where would you find these inflatables? We would make the inflatable boat industry rich. I think we need to take a hard look at this and decide as a sport where we're going. I don't see the leaders of our organizations taking that up, and I think it's time they did. So.
One of the things that I think has changed is that our youth are not being taught. The training of kind of tailor, kind of spell up to the legal division. All kinds of little tricks for your coaches to make it better. That's not the case. And I don't know how to change this. I mean, I have a son that went through that. Some of the candidates, some of the competitors were unaccountable. Yet their coaches were happy to me about it. You know, let me make an effort for our youth to learn exactly what, this kind of spirit. I mean, young adults and older adults feel very different about it. It's really sad. But I'm like Randy over there. Here is our
Just to kind of counterpoint what Dick had said earlier, do I think fleet umpire racing is for every event? Absolutely not. Do I think it would work for race week? Absolutely not. Is it needed for beer can racing on Wednesday nights? Absolutely not. But I think there's a venue for it. There are certain fleets that do want it. Again, they do tend to be more of the Sailor Pro fleets. But again, if they want it, we want to be there to support them. We want to be able to provide good umpiring for them and for those fleets and for those events that do want it. So that's where we're at right now. And again, we're in our infancy. So if you've got ideas on how to make it work, again, it has limited use, but I think it's a good limited use if we can do it well. That's the key. So anything we can do to improve it, don't hesitate to let me know.
I think it comes back to something we talked earlier, very early on in the day. I mean, it's a very diverse sport. So we have tons of the different vehicles of racing formats. And it's just one of many that we have. And it's great to have it because it's generating your other events. I mean, it's generating other participation in other classes. It's not going to fit. Yeah, it's not going to suit everybody, but it certainly has its need. And certainly, I mean, where was team racing 20 years ago or 30 years ago? Where was, all these other things? And it's going to evolve. I mean, our sport's evolving. So we have to evolve and grow. And it was interesting to hear. I mean, my dilemma, again, do I have judges out on the water for world championships and stuff? Or do I just have them out there policing? And to hear what you guys are saying, is that, yeah, now we've got owners, not wanting to go. We're trying to make them go to the protest room, and they're not going to go.
You'll save a lot of relationships there. By
Yeah.
having, on the water judges.
Yeah.
The worst thing you can see in sailing is two owners screaming about rules and neither backing down, and then watching two friends walk away from each other and never speak to each other again. I mean, you bring up Corinthian, but that's almost like the worst thing that can happen in our sport. Having two great sailors, owners, walk away from the sport where it could have been solved with 3 boats on the water. And I think when you bring up the cost, you'll find a lot of these fleets, the actual fleet themselves, will pay for it just to stop this. I've watched a couple of fleets actually fall apart because of not having it. So, I mean, you want to keep these guys having fun, having beers on the shore with each other, then there's fleets that you will pay for it, and you need to take care of it on the water.
Beyond the Corinthian discussion, when you look at football, baseball, a lot of other basketball, and the referees make the call. Sometimes they miss the call. Sometimes they get it wrong. Of course, they have the video replays. Maybe we, evolve to drone footage, instant replays or whatever. But, I think a step forward is, the umpiring of events that make sense to the umpires, to provide that, okay, here's where we're at this point, moving on, and then you don't have the 2-3 hour protest discussions that might be.
That's great. You know what? We're getting close to the end, but we were going to talk about some other neat umpiring roles with some of these new classes, and that's what I was touching. You had a friend in town last weekend. He was talking about high-speed umpiring. I mean, we talk about what it's available and dealing with the M32s, and gentleman spoke at World Sailing, about what they're dealing with the Extreme 40 series and things like that. So there's a lot of really exciting, who's going to umpire these GP50s, by the way,
Just make sure you have a really good motor on the back of those boats, okay? Two motors. I've been a part of the M32s. I've not yet done any of the other high-speed classes, but that is a rush. And talk about having to keep your speed up to match them around the course. Because if you come off the throttle for a second, you are in the dust. So that is a really fun aspect of umpiring, and that is an aspect where it happens so quickly that you really don't need the 2 umpire in a boat kind of thing for those events, because you don't even have time to talk it through. As the single umpire, you kind of have to make the call, see it, make the call. And what's most important to have on your boat going at those speeds is a spotter. You need somebody that knows where every other boat is at all times. You cannot lose track of a boat while you're out there. You do not want to be the umpire that gets hit by a boat going that fast. So typically your setup there is you've got the umpire and you've got a spotter. And like I said, the spotter's job is to make sure that they always know where every boat is, and we are not ever in the path of a boat that's out there. anybody who's going to be around for race week, Randy says the M32s are coming. So, check it out. It's a hoot to watch them.
Oh, they're sort of self-tending. They said they've got a couple of spots figured out. We'll wedge them in there. And they go by so fast, they really don't have any impact on the rest of the courses, And they only want a 15-minute race, and a 3/4 mile leg, so I'm thinking right out in front of the resort. Plenty of room, and that harbor's not near as full as it could be. Exactly. Well, that's going to be number 7, actually. So, but anyway. Well, that's great. It's been a great day today. I guess, kind of want to just, before we depart and into our dark and stormies, and, what were the big takeaways besides, leaving the class flag up? I'm still sticking with that one. That's my number 1. But, I think, we talked what good race management is, and it's communication. It's, working with we have 3 organizations. We've got the organizing authority that we're trying to keep happy. Don't worry about that. But, the customer and the sailor happy. And then, of course, we've got the class, that we have to be responsible for too. And I think the important thing is being able to walk the docks, be involved in what's going on with the sailors so we know what their needs are. And if we can do that, we're going to help grow that particular class. We've got quite the responsibility. We talk about, our sports challenge. Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Well, it's the people in this room that are going to grow the sport, because you guys are going to offer that experience. We're in like Mark said, we're in the entertainment business, but we're going to provide that service that makes people want to be racing next weekend. And they're going to come on, and it's nothing different than what we've asked for race week for years. The best thing I can have is the guy go back to San Francisco and tell his neighbor what a great time he had at race week. I can't spend enough money marketing. So the best thing we can do is make sure they have a great time. And that's any regatta. That's not just this one. So what other takeaways did people hear today that thought they were surprised at, or what we need to do that we're not doing? There we go. Well, in current. Something new.
I think it was a great day. I'd like to thank probably for all of us, the panel, for coming in, coming to Charleston, giving us your expertise.
It's been a great panel. I do want There's the other, as race officers, we have, all right, well, we'll use race week as an example, I guess. But we have 6 PROs out there on the courses, but we have 225 race committee volunteers out there supporting them all. And I want to make the point, it's also, those are customers too. I guess we missed one, Mark Foster's on that panel, and he came in and ran the J24 North Americans, right? And I was out of town, or I came back in just to hear, Randy, do you know this Mark Foster guy? He was awesome, oh my gosh, he was great, and he does an unbelievable job of, I think, respecting the amount of time people put in and the efforts. of all the volunteers. And that's something I kind of, it's important for all of us to kind of remember that these people are giving up their time to run races for us. And it's not always easy. It's not, it's difficult. And I know everybody's doing the best they can. And we have to respect that. So thanks, Mark, for raising the bar on that, Thanks. And my last little tidbit before we go, I'm kind of chuckling at this thing. I got this text, I don't know. It was a few months ago. And it was from a board member of U.S. Sailing, by the way. And it was, keep an open mind, was all it said, was keep an open mind. And I think that's important for all of us to always keep an open mind. Everybody's got great ideas, and there's going to be the pieces of spaghetti that are going to stick on the wall, and sometimes more spaghetti sticks than not. But I think that's the most important thing, that we just keep moving forward, keep an open mind, do not discount anybody's suggestions whatsoever that's out on the race course. Oh, did that?
Dropping like flies.
Oh man, it's a long day. Is that? I guess so. It's working. So with that, I'm exhausted. I don't know about you guys. We've got what have we got? Oh yeah. So we do have dinner at the club here, right? Right. And there's still spaces available. There are. We just like to accommodate you if you like to come. If you're interested at all, you can kind of just raise your hand. I'll take a count. Not committed. Okay, got it. That worked well. Well, good. And now let's get the bar open. I'm going to take the panelists and stuff. We need to go out to the deck for a photo op. So the rest of you guys can start drinking. Thanks for coming.